Thank you very much. I feel very guilty because everybody was learning with the Bren, and far be it from me to interrupt you, but I did it already, so I guess we'll continue. As we all know, tonight is Yom Yerushalayim, just a week away from Shavuot, and the first time in 1967 that the Kotel was open to the public was on Shavuot. And I learned in the Mir Yeshiva, and the Mir Yeshiva, they started a custom then, which has basically been going on for everyone else ever since, to daven kavatikim at the Kotel. So they were very excited about going to the Kotel after all these years, but as excited as they were, they could not keep up with the Rosh Yeshiva Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. Old Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, old, wan, and weak, with cancer in the tongue. He was jumping, they couldn't keep up with him. And indeed, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz used to tell us that one should only go to the Kotel, one should not go to the Kotel more than once a month. For he was afraid that if you go more than once a month, it would lose its numinous nature. He didn't say this, but I think he meant this. You could go to the Kotel and then top it off with an ice cream cone. Inappropriate. That's my own application, but you should go but once a month. So of all people, my chavruta said, you say to go once a month, and yet the Rosh Yeshiva goes all the time. To which Rav Chaim gave the most beautiful answer. He said, I know. I can't control myself. And I think that's the perfect balance. To know cerebrally but once a month to maintain its holy nature, but to be unable to control yourself, and you'll go much more often. All those who lay claim to Jerusalem, Richard the Lionhearted, Titus, Saladin the Marauder, I skipped a couple. All those who lay claim to it, Godfrey of Orient, the Crusader, none of their descendants ever mourned for it, nor did they fast for it. And we have never stopped. It never left our heart. As Nachman Breslov says, no matter where I'm going. It could be a boulevard in Queens, or an alley in Chicago, or a crescent in Manchester, or a piazza in Venice. But I'm headed to Yerushalayim. That's in our heart. That's embedded. So I want to tell you a sort of contemporaneous story. In 1982, it was the 15th anniversary of the reunification of Yerushalayim, and it was still very, very exciting. So the Jerusalem municipality, with a lot of other sponsors, decided to make a big spritz, as it's called in American Yiddish. A big spritz, and the culminating event was an essay about my Jerusalem. And the winner was promised, the prize was being flown to Israel in a week in the Plaza Hotel, which today is called Leonardo, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we entered the contest. And the day of the celebration of Yom Yerushalayim, I get a phone call. Chanoch Teller, again. Ah! You won the contest. So she said, are you married? I said, yes. So come to the Canada room at 8 o'clock tonight, and they're not going to let you in, but tell them that Aviva sent you, and that'll open the door. So what happened was, when they invited all kinds of prestigious VIPs. There was the American ambassador and the Canadian ambassador and all kinds of dignitaries, and the whole event was chaired by Teddy Kollek. That name is familiar to you? He was named after the stadium. And by the way, Teddy Kollek, for those not familiar, he was a man who did not have a strong affinity. These are criminal levels of understatement. Did not have a strong affinity for religious Jews. He had a strong disaffinity. And that summer was the summer of, I'm 27. I don't know how old you are or how far you go back. That was the summer where they opened Kfish Ramot, and Lo Aleinu, people were stoning cars on Shabbat. And he went crazy. He just went bonkers. And he did everything he could to disenfranchise religious Jewry. Didn't matter Haredi, Dati. He lost control. So when they invited all these people, they didn't yet invite the winner because the judges had not selected who the winner was. I'm not trying to engage in ego gratification. It's just an interesting story. So And I also never went to an affair like this. It was like people in stretch limos or the Israeli equivalent, and women with their hairs and updos and gowns. And I'm riding on my tustus. My wife is running behind me. And finally we pull up. It's funnier than you think. And as we pull up, and so as soon as I walk in, like this, oh, I'm sorry. As soon as I pull up, so the bouncer comes over to get rid of me. And I said, I'm supposed to be here. He said, let me see your invitation. I said, I don't have an invitation, but tell Aviva that I'm here. So I hear, they say to Aviva, Chanoch Teller, she goes, oh, and she comes and she says, Mazal Tov. She had never anticipated that the winner was a religious person. So I had to make a speech in front of everyone. And again, the chairman of the event was Teddy Kalik, and he sees me, and as we say in Yiddish, he's schwarz for the Egen. And he just had such a halishut hadat after all that he had done, and I'm going to get up. Now his party's name was Bonei Yerushalayim. That was his party. So I got up, and he'd give me this punim, like, please don't be mevayesh me, don't embarrass me. So I got up and I said, Mr. Mayor, with a pregnant pause. And I said, Mr. Mayor, I too would like to be a Bonei Yerushalayim. If only I could extend my merpeset. Now, in those days, he made it all but impossible to build anything. He felt that it detracted from the beauty of Jerusalem. We were at that time, I think we were 18 children in 2 rooms. Well, we don't have 18 yet. But anyway, we were a lot of kids in 2 rooms. And we really need, so he said, yes. He jumps up to the stage, he pulls me off, I'll do it. And what happened was, if you'd ever apply for, in those days, it's a different administration today, because I'm very fond of the current mayor of Jerusalem. And the previous, I just taught my class today that I was speaking about the Chafetz Chaim and how he created a revolution with Gemachim. Albeit, if you look in Ahavat Chesed, which was what I was teaching, it's clear that the Chafetz Chaim wouldn't recognize the term, even though he created it. He calls it Ahavat Chesed. Well, if you know the Sefer, Ahavat Chesed, that teeny little Sefer, or in English, Ahavat Chesed. So he writes there, everyone can open a Gemach, or Gemilut Chassidim as he calls it. What? He writes this to an incredulous audience of impoverished Ukrainian Jews. How in the world? They can't finish the month. How in the world can we lend to others? He said simple. Classic Chafetz Chaim. The depths of simplicity. All you have to save 1 kopek a month. The end of the year, you have a ruble. Then the 5 years, you have 5 rubles. That's a tidy enough figure to loan to others. Came a snowflake and a snowball, and it avalanched. And I don't know this neighborhood so well, although I teach across the street. But I'll bet you, even here, there must be dozens of gemachim. In religious, that's not my topic tonight, but it's amazing how this thing has become so stretched out, and people are so involved in it. Why did I get onto this about gemachim? Yeah, I don't know how. About building Jerusalem, I don't know. I told my students, gosh, it was a good one, but I can't remember it. Oh, yes, thank you. So I said, in Yerushalayim, thank you very much. I need you guys to come along with me. So I said, the previous, there's a gemach in Jerusalem, the length and the breadth of scratch. There's a gemach in Israel. I assume you know, gemach is a contraction of Gemilut Chassidim, like lending money without interest and giving diapers and pacifiers and wedding gowns and tefillin and you name it, whatever the ingenuity is. In the Harnof directory, there are 3 pages, teeny small print of just baby paraphernalia, from layettes to strollers to cribs to Dennis Browns. Those are the torture devices for babies whose feet are crooked. In Kiryat Sefer, there's 2 pages in the directory, just the mousetraps. It's unbelievable how this thing has expanded. So I said, in Israel, there's a gemach the length and the breadth of the country. In Jerusalem alone, there's over 15 branches. What am I referring to? Yad Sarah. Is that what you said? Very good. Yad Sarah. Founded by the former mayor of Jerusalem, Uri Loploliansky, in honor of his mother, whose name was not Yad. And it's just unbelievable what this has done. There are more, and it pays to go in there. I mean, you should never need it. More wheelchairs and crutches and bedpans than the eye can take in. And there's equipment that you can never pronounce and certainly never afford. Okay, but that wasn't our subject. back to this award. So he gets me off this. So he would never allow to build something in Jerusalem. So he took me up the next day, show up in City Hall, and he was actually good for his word. And so what I want to show you is a picture. Now, I'm 27 already, but I don't know if you can see. This was at the Jerusalem Prize. And there he is, trying to get me off the stage, and it was worth it for me. I never got that week. I never got flown to Israel. I never got a week in the plaza, but I got the Merpeset. So it was a great distribution of our kids. Okay, so I want to segue from here to a hero of Jerusalem, certainly the Torah world. And we're going to go back. I want to talk about Rav Nosson C. Finkel, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir. Is that a nod because you're from Chicago? Chicago people feel very proud whenever I talk about Rav Nosson C. Finkel, legitimately. So Rav Nosson C. Finkel, now, every good story has a backstory. And the backstory is his namesake, Rav Nosson C. Finkel, the Alter from Slobodka, Hasaba mi Slobodka. Now, in Slobodka, at its height, it had 500 students. All of them were spiritual giants. So much so that there was a kollel in Slobodka of 14 giants, which had a real spiffy name. It was called Yad HaChazaka. Get it? Yad, 14. And they were the likes of Rav Aaron Kudler, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rav Yaakov Ruderman, Rav Yitzchak Hutner, Rav Pesach Prushkin, Rav Elia Henkin, Rav Eliezer Yehuda Finkel, Rav Reuven Katz, Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, bummer, Eliezer Yehuda Finkel. Okay, now first of all, I didn't memorize these names, but they're so significant, I remembered almost all of them. David Leibowitz, now they're institutions, and I hope on the rebound I'll pick up all. Rav Aaron Kudler, Lakewood, and that's belittling his accomplishments. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Torvadas, Muncie. Rav Yaakov Ruderman, Yisrael, Baltimore. Rav Yitzchak Hutner, Chaim Berlin in America, Pachat Yitzchak in Israel. Rav Elia Henkin, the Posek of America. Rav Pesach Prushkin, the Rebbe of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav David Leibowitz, the Rosh Yeshiva of Chafetz Chaim of Queens, etc., 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 etc. Rav Eliezer Yehuda Finkel, the founding Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir. Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, Switzerland. Reuven Katz, Petach Tikva. Are you getting the drift of what I'm saying? This is the who's who of the next generation. How did he accomplish this? How did he be able to get all this talent into his yeshiva? So you might say, no matter where these giants would have gone, they would have excelled, which is probably true. But to me, it just seems too great a coincidence that they're all in one place. I'm aware of the fact that some people don't like the word coincidence. Personally, I think it's a really religious word because the root of coincidence is coincide. God's right in there. What did he do? Now, if you have children, or you yourself attend to the school, every school promotes, we maximize potential. It's that's exactly what you want. But what he achieved was, I thought in high school, to tell you the truth, I didn't think much in high school. I wasn't even there so long. But I thought if I would have midterms all year long, I'd become a genius. I'd also probably crack up. Der Alter put everyone in finals every day, and he was the calmest man that ever walked this earth. He got everyone to achieve all that they could be. He took an Arla and turned them into Rabbi Aaron Kudler, a Yitzi into Yitzchak Hutner, Yankele into Yaakov Kamenetsky. It was a factory for greatness, for fulfilling everything that you could do. I asked my students in seminary, this is funny. It's funny and it's funny. I can't say it's almost hilarious. I asked my students, how much of your potential do you use? One girl said 9%. One girl said 11%. One girl said, I couldn't make this up, 13.4%. Mind you, 36.8% of all statistics are made up. How does she know that, 13.4? In any event, if you're not using 90% or 95%, this is an indictment. We're here for a purpose. We have to make the most of it. So now we shift to Chicago in the 1950s. One of the Finkels ended up in Chicago. Became a caterer, did very well. And his son, Nady Finkel, was a regular, ordinary American kid. Went to a co-ed school, went to a co-ed camp. Like many kids from affluent families, would play a good game of golf on Sunday. And when he was in 10th grade, his parents were going on a trip to Israel, and they took him along. They sent the younger brother to the grandparents in St. Paul. And the itinerary was the classic Hadassah Hospital, Yad Kennedy, Yad Vashem, Yad. It's the regular. And also was to visit the great uncle, Rabbi Eliezer Yehuda Finkel, the founding Rosh Yeshiva the Mir, the great uncle of Nady Finkel. He comes in to meet his great uncle, sporting a Chicago Cubs baseball cap. Safe to assume the other parts of the outfit were not yeshivish penguin black and white. But the Gedolim, and I've been studying them a large part of my life, have a certain vision that certainly I'm not blessed with. And he saw input Yankee Doodle, output Aram Gadol. Do you follow what I'm saying? Or if you've had a connection with the Rosh Yeshiva, it's just amazing the sight, the far sight. I'm tempted. How are we doing time-wise? How are we doing? Go for the full 3 hours? Just give me an idea. I didn't mean for that lengthy an answer. 7 minutes left. Okay. Scratch those examples. Okay. And he sees this boy. Now he realizes that he cannot convince the parents to just let him stay there for the rest of his life, which was his agenda. But he does convince the parents, let me have him for the summer. And he learns with Gedolei Yisrael, the Gedolei Hador he learns with. And I don't mean to imply there are not great people in Chicago, but he's exposed to some of the greatest Talmidei Chacham on earth, and he gets bitten by the bug and is so attached to learning. He goes back to Chicago, finishes high school, and we'll say this delicately. When his parents were vacationing in Miami, Rabbi Eliezer Finkel, accidentally on purpose, sends him a one-way ticket to Israel. He's very beloved, and the whole class escorts him to the airport before the days of terrorists and security and right onto the tarmac. And in those days, a trip to Israel was not like today. You get on a plane in Kennedy and 9 hours later you're in Israel. It was a long, protracted propeller journey, one leg and another leg and another leg. There weren't even kosher meals on flights. And when he landed in Israel, his problem of room and board was all settled because his great uncle, Rabbi Eliezer Finkel, was a widower, and he was going to sleep in his house. He comes into the home, and he was just dreaming about dreaming. And Rabbi Eliezer says to him, tell me a chiddush. And he said, you know what? I'll take a quick nap. I'll wake up refreshed, and I'll tell you. No. No chiddush, no sleep. This is tough love. This is slabotka, all you can be. So he sends him up to Beis Medrash. He stumbles down the steps 25 minutes later, and he tells him a kasha on Tosfos. Leizidl gives him a kiss in the head, says, Shlaf gesund. The next morning, yeah. Leizidl doesn't realize that his great-nephew is awake. His eyes are just flickering in the pre-dawn. And above the bed is a shas. He comes in and he caresses the volumes and kisses each one. He's stricken right away by the love of Torah. And he applies himself and he learns. And because we have 6 minutes, we're going to telescopically condense. And when it comes time for Shidduchim, his great uncle decides that Nosson should marry his granddaughter, Leah Finkel, which, think about it, is pretty efficient. She wouldn't have to change her cufflinks or change her embossed sitter. And she told me on many occasions that when she married him, he was not yet Nosson Finkel, but he kept on working. Now, why in the world would this woman, very intelligent and articulate and smart, attractive, whose father is the Rosh Yeshiva, whose grandfather is the founding Rosh Yeshiva, whose uncle is Chaim Shmulevitz, whose cousin is Menachem Pertzovitz. And that's just the tip of the Yichusberg. Why we should be interested in an American Yankee Doodle who can't speak Yiddish, who's fresh in learning? The answer is because thus her grandfather said. As if he would be in charge, there wouldn't be a shidduch crisis today. He gets married, and he's continuing to apply himself. Very kind man. Very diligent. And in 1981, the Mir Rosh Hashiva Rebbeinu Shvinkel, his father-in-law, passes away, and he left instructions that Rav Nosson Tzvi should be the next Rosh Hashiva. This is what I call the theory of relativity, when a son-in-law becomes the next Rosh Hashiva. And it was at that time that he developed, I think developed is the correct word, but it sounds strange to me because I'm describing something very negative and developed sounds very positive. He developed Parkinson's disease, which then quickly became advanced Parkinson's. And as I'm sure you know, Parkinson's is a breakdown of the central nervous system. There's no controlling of the limbs. It's difficult to speak. It's very difficult to walk. The toes curl over. And I imagine most people with Parkinson's become somewhat reclusive. But it was as if the more afflicted he became, the more he was in the limelight. Now, Rav Lezer wanted to demonstrate that Torah is open for everyone. In the most demonstrative way, he had the doors removed from yeshiva. Everyone can come. I remember in the winter, when it was raining, there was a shallow lake as you came into the yeshiva, because there were no doors, until the Knesset passed a law that because of security reasons, there had to be, every building required a door. So Rav Nosson Tzvi extended this. There's a rule in learning which is, Ein adam lomed ela ma shelibo chafetz. A person learns what they desire to learn. So he said, whatever you wish to learn. The yeshiva mesechtas, Rikiyut, Iyun, Shabbat, Yeridea, whatever you want. And wherever people wanted, he created a Beit Midrash, filled it up with stenders, made a Rebbe, a Rosh Chabura, and the Mir began expanding, expanding, and expanding. But this requires a huge budget, huge. And he has a reputation of being the greatest fundraiser, but it's not true. I mean, he was a great fundraiser. But he had enormous bizyonot. There are times he went to meetings with very wealthy people, and they never showed up. Or they said, let me think about it. And that usually stayed cerebral. Or people would write a check for $18. He needed huge money. His agenda was exclusively to increase Torah learning. And it wasn't just for his yeshiva, for any yeshiva. He paid $180,000 a year for buses to take Avrechim to yeshiva. Not because he had something against Eged. Not because he didn't want men and women together. But if you're picking up Avrechim at their home and you're delivering them to the yeshiva, this becomes a Beit Midrash on wheels. And it means more learning. That was his agenda. And he would travel to America to raise money. And they saw this man flailing all over. They said, how did you schlep this sick man? He said, we didn't schlep him. He schlepped us. And there was no bush. He just wanted to raise money to increase learning. He went to a Sephardi gentleman in New Jersey, a very wealthy man, and the Rosh Hashiva sitting across from him, flailing all over, and he said, Rosh Hashiva, please, I have a jacuzzi-fitted pool. Take a swim, and you'll feel much better. He said, I can't do it. Go ahead, you can do it. I can't do it. I can't do it because ever since I took upon my shoulders the responsibility of the yeshiva, I have no time for leisure. He said, please. He said, Rosh Hashiva, if you take a swim in my pool, I'll write you a check 4 times what I was going to write. Before he finished the sentence, he was unbuttoning his shirt. There was nothing that he wouldn't do on behalf of the yeshiva, on behalf of Torah learning for everyone. And people said, yeshiva, today the yeshiva is over 10,000 students. He said, do you know their names? He said, I don't know their names. But I can assure you, I love them. And I believe that was very true. There was a boy who, I can't describe this accurately because I've been spared this, but a boy had an abscess in his gum, which I'm told is screaming soprano pain. And so he said, we'll go to my dentist. This was 6:30 at night. And like all dental work, it always gets worse before it gets better. So it always gets worse before it gets better. So the dentist pinned him down with one hand, and the Rosh Hashiva pinned him down with the other hand. And the boy clenched his eyes closed and grabbed the Rosh Hashiva's hand, and his fingernails were impaling the Rosh Hashiva's hand. When the procedure was over, the Rosh Hashiva's hand was dripping blood. He said, Rosh Hashiva, Why didn't you say something? He said, because I saw that your pain was worse than mine. Now, I have to end, I realize, but I just want you to know, his agenda was people should learn more. And he had these cockamamie schemes, how to get people to learn more, which he always introduced at Shalosh Shudas, at Sudash Lishit. One time he decided he's going to reinvent, or reinsert, or reincarnate his great uncle's system of learning 12 hours a day uninterrupted. Because if you make a calculation, the time you need to sleep and to eat and to daven, you're left with 12 hours net. There's no time allocated for internet, for a newspaper, for coffee, learning. He said, I'm putting up a sign-up sheet. I want to see your names on the board. There's a boy who bounced around America, then came to Israel and continued to bounce around. And one day he washed up, shipwrecked on the shores of the Mir. And you can reckon, well, we're going to call him Dovi, because that's his name. And Dovi, he was not from the great Matmidim of the Mir Yeshiva. You could recognize him all the times outside with a coffee in one hand, cell phone in the other hand, cigarette between the hands, observing traffic, directing traffic. That's where he was. So he said, Dovi, the Yeshiva said, I didn't see your name on the sign-up list. And he's thinking, duh. I mean, he never lived 12 minutes uninterrupted. 12 hours? He said, Dovi, put his hand in his, and he felt that in the vice, the snap, crackle, pop. He said, Dovi, you're going to sign up? He said, okay, Rosh Hashiva. And then under his breath, the biggest linetter of his lifetime. And came that Sunday. And there was this feeling of grease in his stomach. What in the world did I sign up for? How in the world? But the Yeshiva knew how to build buildings and knew how to build people, especially troubled people. And he put his faith in him. And somehow he stepped up to the plate and learned 1 hour, and 2 hours, and 5 hours, and 9 hours. And the Chavruz had just come along from the ride, knew that Dovi would never pull this off. And he pulled 12 hours uninterrupted. But everyone knows, everyone knows the kickoff is always exciting. The challenge is the next time. And the second day came, and 3 hours, and 7 hours, and 10 hours, and pulled it off. And the fourth day, and the fifth day, and the seventh day. And on the eighth day, Dovi came running to Beis Medrash. He said, Rashiva, I so much would want to tell my parents, but I know they would never believe me. And I wish I could tell my Rebbe in high school, tried so hard to distract me from the distractions of America, but he would never believe me either. But Rashiva, last night, for the first time in my life, I dreamt of learning. Rashiva was so sick in his wheelchair, we did the equivalent of a crazy dance with him. And the guy pulled it off. 30 days uninterrupted, 12 hours. So I'm almost about to conclude. Nosson Tzvi was from Chicago. Chicago is a very benevolent, magnanimous, generous town. But for reasons I don't know, and I literally wrote the book, more about that in a second, he only went to Chicago once to collect money, and that was in 2003. And because he spent 1 year in Skokie, if you know about this, yeshiva, because he spent 1 year in the yeshiva, and people in Chicago, their hearts were bursting from pride. He had come back to his hometown. So he was going to speak in the Skokie yeshiva, but he was too sick to go down the stairs in his wheelchair, so they wheeled him in from the front in the glass door, and everyone gathered around as close as they possibly could, and this is what he said. He said, I too am from Chicago, and I too love baseball, and I became a Rosh Hashiva, and you can too. And that was it. And he had injected them, mainlined, with inspiration. Other speakers with passion, gesticulations, and all kinds of theatrics could not accomplish what he did in those 15 words. The time is not here, so I can't, but he was able to do it. Lastly, it's final. Lastly, there was a fellow I got friendly with in America in high school, and then we both came to Israel about the same time, and he was learning in the Mir Yeshiva. I eventually joined the Mir. And he was learning there, and then got married, had a couple of kids, and went back to America to become gainfully employed. And then he was struck with a terrible, debilitating disease, which ultimately claimed his life. He had 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl. And the Yeshiva felt terrible. And he wrote the widow, he said, I'm going to help you raise the children. And every single month, he'd write a letter to the boys and learning, and they would write them what he's learning, and he would question them and help answer their questions. And this went on, and when the boys came of age, they came to Israel to learn. They did not learn in the Mir Yeshiva, but they would dine on his table. And this is not to imply that the Rebbetzin is not as gracious and kind as can be, but she cannot host 9,000 students. But they were privileged characters. They were orphans. They would dine at his table. And all this time, the girl who's not getting letters, is not at the table. She felt left out. And the Rosh Yeshiva maintained the same schedule even with his debilitation. He would learn in the house, prone. Sometimes he would have a muscle spasm. He would just jump in the air. Before he hit ground zero, he said, "What was that, Tasha?" And the Chaburas would come into the house. One day, this girl gets a letter from Yerushalayim. And she opens it up, and there is a large heart in red, filled in red, signed Nosson Tzvi Finkel. She said to me, "In my life, I never felt more loved from the time my father died." I was thinking to myself, what was the Rosh Yeshiva thinking as he was coloring that heart? As the bank was calling on the phone and debtors were breaking down the door and boys were coming over to learn, he's filling the heart with all of his heart, for that's the way that he is everything. Thank you for your attention. I just want to bring one more thing. I brought a couple books over here. I think you'll find them enriching. I know I will. And L'Chavod Yom Yerushalayim, I've discounted them, and if you buy 2, the third one is free. And if you buy 4, then 2 are free. If you buy 6, I pay you. Okay.